So, Coach, I've again, thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity. I met
Sure.
you and I learned a lot from that short intervention, but I think there's such a deep reservoir of your wisdom that I can poke as much as I can. And thank you again. So, as I sent you these questions, I think the first one I'm very curious about, how do you define purpose? Because there's so many different definitions, and especially for we talk about like a purpose for a 13, 14 years old versus for more like senior college or even adult. From your
Right.
experience, how would you see that one?
Well, it's interesting. I think you find your purpose later in life, right? It wasn't until, not that long. I had a friend who was dying, and I remember asking him, what's the point of all of this? And he said, you have to find your purpose, and then you need to give it away. And
Hmm.
so for 13-year-olds and college age kids, that's almost not something that's ever going to enter into their thinking.
Hmm.
It's more that the people who are supervising their journey
Hmm.
need to understand what is the purpose and value of the things that they're doing in their journey,
Hmm.
so that when the light of enlightenment does shine on these young people, oh, that was worth it, and I was on the right path. So
Hmm.
obviously I've become a little cynical because I'm old and I've been around sport now. I've been coaching for 52 years. And, you know, I think we've lost the purpose of sport. Um, when, when I was growing up, we played. On a Saturday, we'd get up and we'd go to a basketball court or something and we would play. And our parents may or may not have even known where we were. That was a part of the joy of the experience. And then I had a life-altering moment when I was coaching at West Point. There was a plaque on the wall, and it was a quote from General MacArthur. And the quote was that on the friendly fields of strife are sown the seeds that on later fields will bear the fruits of victory. And that aha moment in reading that for me was, oh, I'm going to help through the vehicle of sport, young people learn to become better adults in life, learn how to strategize, learn how to win, more importantly, learn how to lose. And that was why I entered into the coaching experience. Unfortunately, that has by and large been lost in the process.
Hmm. So in terms of this whole journey of enjoying the sports, helping, as you said, the people who are supervising the journey, the coach, the parents, maybe the senior, people around can
Mhm.
help. So what are the, or say, practical things you would suggest them to do in order to say, hey, we don't want to lose that end in view while we are helping our kids to grow in the sports? What are the tips you offer?
Well, I think you've just got to remember that, go back to the quote. We are trying to help people learn. Every day in sport, there's a scoreboard. You learn more in a squash court than you probably learn in a chemistry lab. I
Mhm.
mean, it's a statement of fact, because every day you're confronted with looking in a mirror and saying, I either won or I lost, or what did I learn, and did I enjoy the journey? And we, as the people guiding this process, need to keep that perspective for them. And the things that we do need to be protected, um, as that's the end goal. It's interesting, at least here in the United States, sport has become a vehicle for college, getting into a better college. And by and large, parents are treating this as almost an ROI. What's the return of our investment monetarily, emotionally, time? It's getting into a slightly better college than maybe we would have gotten into, she or he would have gotten into before. But what happens then? College cannot be the end game. And you see many people, and squash, at least in America, is facing that challenge. We don't see that many people playing squash after their college years. The activity at the clubs is diminishing. Um, Sports like pickleball and padel are cannibalizing a lot of it. And I think it's because the end game has become getting into a better school. That's not why we should be taking sports. I spoke to at a camp of juniors recently, and I said to the campers, how many of you are playing squash to get into college? And then I paused and I said, stop it. That is not why you should be here. It's going to take care of itself anyway. If you're a rock star, you're going to get reached out to. If you're not a rock star, which is fine, then you can walk onto a college team and enjoy the extracurricular experience. But that's not why shouldn't be why you're doing this.
Yeah.
Purpose. That's the purpose to me. Helping people become better people. So okay, that sounds nebulous. What am I talking about? What we face in our world today is a lot of anger. There's not enough, there's the middle class, the middle view has evaporated. If you're politically not on my team, I hate you. If you are, there's no room for discourse. You're here or you're there. And there's a lot of anger that surrounds that. So you go on a squash court and you see somebody expose a level of anger. There's your teachable moment. You've got to learn you can't do that, because in life, you're going to be at work, you're going to have a fight with your colleague or your boss, or you're going to be upset about something, you lose a deal. You can't go home and fight with your partner. That's not okay. You learn that through sport, and you don't learn that in chemistry.
Mm.
And so these are the kinds of things, these are the values and the purpose of sport overall.
Yeah, I think there are two words come to my mind when I'm hearing you. One is called passion, and the other one is called compassion.
Hmm.
So passion is something we value, we like, we
Mhm.
appreciate, but overly the passion can turn into anger,
You sure?
disappointments, right? Because everything, if you go overdose it, it becomes negative.
Mhm.
However, compassion is altogether. We are putting things not just for us, but also for the general good.
Mhm.
I think that's can cure somehow.
That's beautiful. I've never heard that. I'll steal it now and I'll use it in my travels if you don't mind. No, but it's very true. And one of the problems we face is everything is at our fingertips now. We see it instantaneously. And I watched the World Junior Championships in Houston, and because of what they're seeing, the young juniors, almost without exception, somebody would win a match, run up the glass and hold themselves up atop, or get down and before they would even shake their partner's hand. And I use the word partner pointedly. This isn't your opponent, this is your partner. You've shared an experience on court. The scoreboard said one person won and one person didn't, but this is it's interesting. I'll tell a story. Years ago, we were recruiting our first young man from South Africa, and we had never had a South African come to Trinity. About a week before the young man came, I get a phone call from somebody on campus and saying, "Coach, is this young person white or black?" I have no idea. Never occurred to me to ask the question. Why? Well, there is apartheid in South Africa. We don't know what this young person's attitudes will be about this. So this young man arrives and he's a man of color. Right? Big hug at the airport. Welcome to the Trinity family. We go down to play an exhibition match, and he goes on court and he's playing against a Caucasian man. They go out on court and they're battling, and it's overtime and they're sweating bullets. The match ends and the Trinity player turns and hugs the guy. We had our answer. He had none of that. Well, that's what we need more of. That's the value of this thing. Bringing people together, not dividing them.
Yeah. Yesterday, I was listening to a podcast. Your friend, Coach Mike Way, was interviewed
Oh,
uh,
wonderful.
by Jerry Gibson, and I learned one thing from that is Mike said, sports build character, and also it reveals your character.
Hmm.
It's like the example you brought up.
Oh, totally. You're exposed. What
Yes.
your essence is, you're exposed. And character is exposed under all levels of discomfort. And and sport is uncomfortable. You're putting yourself on the line, so to speak, and you're physically uncomfortable. And how you handle that, how you handle defeat is so important.
Yeah. 100%. And I'm totally with you on that point of as parents, as coaches, if we can help to expand the perspective of our players to see that because they are young, they are not experienced. But as a coach or as a parent, I think it's important for us. But challenge would be what is the why or the point for the coach and for the parents to get our player to play.
Well, there's a problem. So parents, by and large, many, not all, but many, are the ones driving the concept of getting into a better school, having a higher ranking, entering, there's a tournament in Rhode Island every summer, and they have these huge signups for the draw. And when the draw comes out, they have huge dropouts. Why? Because when they see the draw, they realize there's a match here that might actually hurt their ranking, which might actually lessen their pursuit of the goal. So you have these parents, because it's not the pros that are driving it by and large. The parents are paying the pros. And so now the pros are beholden to that target. And
It's
I
like,
think what has to happen is pros need to say, that's not why I'm doing this with your child. And therefore, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have, unless you can share my goal of growth, I probably won't be able to take you on as a client. I was recently asked by a person to work with their child on the sports psychology component. So I went to Boston and I met with the family, and I love this young lady. She's a terrific girl. And then I listened to the father and I listened to what they were talking about. And I said, you realize that if I take this on, mostly what I'll be doing is undoing what you've done. Are you sure you want me to do this? Because you've created this pressure that's just not necessary.
yeah. So, coach, I'm just very curious. How many people in the States, let's say, are sharing the same value and mindset like you all have?
Well, I'm sure there are many. I mean, I'm not, because I'm old and I have this forum, I can share my views. I think there are many. I also think there's this tsunami keeping up with the Joneses. I think
Mhm.
almost everybody enters into this authentically. My child's 11. What a great sport. I want to get them. Oh, my child is doing pretty well. Well, now all of a sudden the pro is saying, well, she should go to 4 camps this summer. Oh, and then all of a sudden you're on this train that is got taken on a life of its own. So I think we have a tendency to we lose our way. The other thing is, in the name of love, you almost can't help it. You have to be an outlier. And that's not, nobody wants to be an outlier. I had years ago been asked to give a speech to a parent group at a school in Greenwich, Connecticut, which is sort of the epicenter of pressure and success. And I went in, there were about, I don't know, 500 parents. And I said, okay, everybody, how many of you have seen A Few Good Men? And everybody raised their hand. I said, well, you can't take the truth. The truth is, the reason your child is growing up as in a pressurized society is you. You know, if I go to look for a well-balanced child, I want to go to the garage and I want to look in the garage and I want to see tennis rackets and squash rackets and a pogo stick and golf clubs and a box of summer reading. And, and I want the garage to be messy. If I walk into your garage, there are 3 Technofiber rackets stacked up next to each other with brand new string jobs. Where is the balance in this journey? So anyway, the headmistress at this school was running around making sure I wasn't offending any donors. And then at the end of my speech, I got a standing ovation because the people in the room were so happy that I was talking to the person sitting next to them. Point being, you're not talking to me because I have it together, but this person over here doesn't. We lose our way. We lose our way.
Yeah. In Asia and China, there's a term, I think, in the last few years, it's called rat race.
Rat race, sure.
Yeah. I think it's,
Yeah. Yeah. Lemmings running to the cliff. And
yeah.
it's all in the name of love. It's all well intentioned. But, and then there's all kinds of weird. So I remember years ago, I had a young person on my team, lovely person. And was a fairly good squash player, was probably 10 or 11 on the team. And I went to give a speech at a country club that his family belonged to. And people were coming up to me and saying, isn't it great that Joe Blow is playing number 5 at Trinity? Well, Joe Blow wasn't playing number 5 at Trinity. Why? What was that whole thing about?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, thank you. Um, I think the difference between intention and impact is clear because the intention is good, but the impact on, the family, the kids, the
Hmm.
schooling, the whole system might be the opposite. I think
Sure.
we need to be mindful of it. My next question is, any specific tips you have for coaches? Because you have such a wide experience and deep experience as being the head coach for national and for the college. I know there are so many young coaches coming up because of
Mhm.
the growth of the sports.
Right.
Any top tips you want to offer to young coaches when they start their journey, so that all the players and families can benefit from down the road?
I think it's important for us all, I think the single greatest quality that a coach can have, and actually probably almost any leader, is empathy. You have to be able to put yourself on the other side of the desk and understand where this person is coming from for you to truly be able to help them. And I think this is something when I was coaching World Team Tennis, Billie Jean King told me this. She said, body language will tell you everything you need to know. When a person comes to the courts or when a person steps into the pro shop, become an expert at reading their body language. Are they making eye contact with you? Are their shoulders down? Are they hurting? You can tell by looking at their body language and then try to reach them. What's happening? Do you want to talk about it? How can I help? And this goes way beyond boasts and drop shots. And give them a forum in which they can share with you. Now, that all comes down to trust, and trust takes time. You know, trust is a meal served with a teaspoon. It doesn't happen right away. But over time, if they start to understand you genuinely care about them, then they will begin to open up. And then the dots start to connect and you can actually be helpful. So become an expert at reading body language. Make it clear that you're there for the student, that they're not there for you. And I really think the best thing we can do as coaches is to make ourselves obsolete. It always, the beauty of our sport, you listen to the professional tennis players after matches, This is all about problem solving. And you want to get them to the point where they embrace the idea of solving what's going on a court. For 52 years, every time a player has come off the court, I've asked the same question. How's it going? Do you know what they always tell me? They tell me the score. I didn't ask you what the score was. I asked you, how's it going? What's happening? What are you doing that's hurting your opponent? What are they doing that? Let's problem solve. Teach them to problem solve and then get the hell out of the way.
Okay, two things I learned: empathy, reading body language, and make yourself obsolete.
I love it. But we don't, it makes me laugh. You go to these junior tournaments and a young person will come off the court and there are three coaches come running up to coach them and everybody's talking at the same time. And all they've done is confuse this young person. One person talks, give me two or three things to focus on. I'm going back on court. And hopefully through the repetition of that, that student begins to take over the process. There's another thing I'd like to share with you, if you'll let me. Losing is the playground of success. Let them fail. And when that happens, there's your golden opportunity to teach. But recognize that the timing of that is critically important. When a person comes off the court, when a person makes a mistake in the office, when an investor loses money, that is not the moment to talk to them. Their inner temperature is so high, they're not going to hear a word you're saying. Give it a beat. Wait a few hours. Come back to them and say, let's talk about what happened today. Were you not properly prepared? Was the cold a factor? Did you get tight and choke? Everybody chokes. Was the person simply too good for you? If you wait until the next day to have that conversation, you've waited too long and the lesson has scabbed over. I was traveling recently with one of the women on our US team, and I said to her, tell me about the car rides home after you lost a match. And she said, I hated those rides. I absolutely hated them. All well-intentioned, but so counterproductive.
Yeah. So timing is everything, to choose the right time to engage.
In 100%.
Yeah. So coach, looking back at your 52 years of coaching experience, I think there are so many we call proudest or golden moments.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to choose one that you want to share with us, when was that sort of proudest moment in your coaching experience?
Ironically, I think when I think about my proudest moments, it's usually in defeat. I remember one year we played Princeton here and we beat them up pretty good. It was 7-2. And then we went to the Nationals at Princeton. We played them in the finals. And we went up 4-2. And I knew we didn't have a fifth point. I knew the way the matchups were. We lost 5-4. And I hugged the Princeton coach and I could feel him crying. He was so happy. And I was happy for him. After the Nationals are played, both teams line up on the court and they cross court and they shake hands. And I looked down the line at our team and they were all standing there crying, snot running down their noses. They were completely gutted. And I was so proud of them because I realized they truly went all in. They completely exposed themselves to the possibility of elation or the possibility of gutting defeat. How many of us in the course of a day jump all the way in? We'd stick our toe in the water. Well, they went all the way in. And I was so proud of that group. And so I bought every one of them a cell phone cover that said all in as a reminder that you did it. You exposed yourselves. And that's when you're most alive.
Thank you. I know you have a book written a few years ago, Run to the Roar. I read that book. But some of our FindingSquash community friends probably have not read. What is the core message, if you choose to, for those who have not read the book?
Well, the book was a long process in writing, and Jim Zugg and I authored that together. The book was written for three purposes. The first one was as an apology to my three grown children, because I wasn't there for them when they were growing up. I was trying to be the greatest coach or whatever ego need I was trying to fill, and I wasn't there for them. And I wanted to publicly apologize to them. The second lesson was life lessons through sport, which is what we're talking about today. And the third message was learning how to manage fear. And that's where the title Run to the Roar comes from. And it's a very cool story. So I was seeing a psychiatrist, I see him once a week and really wonderful. And he said, Coach, I got to tell you, you're a very odd human being, because I've never met anybody who is so conflict avoidant. You can't even deal with an unpleasant conversation. And yet this weekend, you're going to lead the USA team into the Rogers Center in front of 50,000 people. How do you reconcile those two contrasts? And so he said, I'm going to tell you a story. And it's a true story. And that is that in Africa, lions hunt in packs. They take with them the oldest female of the pride. She's old, infirm, toothless. She cannot catch her own food anymore, but she has the deepest roar. And what they do is they position this old lady in the middle of a field, facing the prey. But on the other side of it is the bush. When she roars, the prey run away from the roar to their death. So the message is, go at the roar, go at the perceived problem. It's never as bad as you think it is. And so take that to the next step. When kids come into my office, or when I'm talking to adults and, executives, and they're wrestling with this thorny issue, you can tell from their body language, they're all tied up in knots. I always ask the rhetorical question, what's the worst that can happen? It's almost never as bad as we make it out in our minds. And so go at the problem. I teach our players, make lists every day, make lists. Before you go to bed at night, look at your list for the next day. On that list, there will be one thing that you really would rather not do. Do that first thing. Get it out of the way. Run to the roar. It's interesting. I've heard since writing the book another story. I think it's the bison, maybe the buffalo, but there is an animal in the world that when a major storm is barreling down on it, it turns and faces the storm and runs at the storm, because it instinctively knows if I run through the storm, it will pass faster. That's how we should be approaching our lives.
Beautiful stories. I think I think this most interesting part I read, and got from it. And thank you for sharing the three
Of
key
course.
messages. And I know you are, if you don't mind, I want to ask you the next one is, I know you're in the midst of writing another book.
Yep.
And if you can share with us what is the book about and why you're
Yeah.
doing that.
Well, the title of the book is What's the Point? And it really is directed to the group that we're talking to today. It's directed to the coaches and the adults, to try to get back to purpose. What are we trying to do here? Because we are losing our way. We're raising an entire generation that doesn't own its journey. And to me, and I'm sure, Thomas, you've experienced this, I'm sure every person that will hear this call has experienced hardship. The result of that hardship is you develop resilience. If you never face it, if your parents, your coaches are protecting the little snowflakes so that they never skin their knee, you're creating cripples. And, they come to us at college now, they look more put together than they've ever looked before. And the first time they face adversity, they fall into a million pieces. Let's let them problem solve. If you get an F on a paper, take the F. It's a measure of your knowledge of the subject matter. Don't cheat. Don't try to get a special exemption. Just deal with it. That's what life is about. So
Yeah,
the only difficulty with writing this book is I was finding I was having a hard time finding positive things to say about the subject. And nobody wants to read a bummer, but yeah,
I can't wait to read the book.
thank
Thank
you.
you. My last question to you is because squash is included into Olympics, and globally there are lots of new sort of initiatives, and in those emerging markets, for example,
Sure.
those people who are new to squash, if you can summarize and introduce squash to people who are new to it, how would you say this sports can bring to people, to families, and to the mankind in general? Because you are the person to speak on that point, the best person to speak on that.
Maybe Mike Way is a better person to talk about that, but and Mike, if you're listening, I am humbled. It is a lifetime sport. It's a game that you can learn. It's a game you can practice alone, which I really like. That's one of the undersold components of it. Once you're taught a couple of things, you can come in here and do some hitting for 20 minutes and get a good little sweat going. Squash is a game based on the retrieval of a dead ball. So it's got a very high exercise component. And it also, because of the multiple walls, it becomes chess at 80 miles an hour. It's an interesting activity. And it's really something that you can feel good about doing. Obviously, people of different playing levels can play together because you can handicap it. If Thomas, if you and I were playing together, you'd be much better than me. So we would handicap you. You would start at -10 and I would start at +5, or you would only be allowed to hit the ball deep and I'd be allowed to hit the ball in. So there's all ways to even the playing field. But the most important thing in my mind is you have two people in a small space. Therefore, our interaction needs to be symbiotic. We need to be dancing around each other. And it really is working together to get a positive outcome. And I think there are very few sports that have those components.
Well, thank you so much, Coach. I really appreciate your time and your wisdom to share
Uh,
with us. And I hope I could spend longer with you on any single moment, but I think you are such a busy person and you have so
uh,
many people you can help. One thing I learned from you last time is uh, your message to the world is, can you remind me of that message? I still remember you said my message of purpose. You beautifully summarize a core message of yours. What is that?
just be a kind and gentle person. Make it a little bit better as you go through. There's a wonderful story, if I could leave you with this. There's a story about a little girl walking down the beach and the sun is coming up, and the beach is scattered with starfish that washed up on shore. And one by one, she's throwing the starfish into the ocean because she knows the sun is going to kill all the starfish. Well, there's an old man walking by her for his morning walk, and he says, "Little girl, what are you doing?" And she said, "I'm trying to save these starfish." And he looks down the beach and he says, "There's so many starfish here. You're not going to make a difference." And she bends over and she grabs a starfish and throws it in the ocean. And she says, "It made a difference for that starfish." Let's make a difference. Let's go out and make the journey for each other more meaningful and richer and happy and full of love and joy. Why not? We get to do that. We just have to choose to do that.
So thank you so much, Coach. I really appreciate your time, and I
Uh,
think both Lulu and I learned a lot from you.